All right, let's talk about the engine that powers, well, everything. We're talking about metabolism. It's this silent, non-stop chemical process happening inside every single one of your cells, right this second. It's what lets you move, think, and even just exist. So, let's get into it.
Have you ever really stopped to think about that? I mean, how does a bite of an apple or a piece of toast actually get turned into the energy you need to have an idea, or to flex a muscle, or just to stay warm? Well, the answer to all of that is metabolism.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the big picture, metabolism as your body's engine. Then we'll get into its two opposing forces, building up and breaking down. After that, we're going to follow a single sugar molecule on its journey to become energy. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see why this matters so much for your health. Let's dive right into our first section. I want you to think of your body as this incredible, high-performance machine. Well, if your body is the machine, then your metabolism is the engine that's always running, turning fuel into the power you need for absolutely everything.
So, what is it, technically? Metabolism isn't just one single thing. It's the grand total, the sum of all the chemical reactions happening in all of your cells. It's this beautifully coordinated dance of building things up and, you guessed it, breaking them down.
And what's the point of all this chemical chaos? Well, it really has three main jobs. First, it frees up the energy from your food so your cells can do their work, like making a muscle contract or a nerve fire. Second, all that activity generates heat, which is what keeps your body temperature stable. And third, it takes smaller, simpler compounds and uses them to build the big, complex molecules you need to live, like proteins. Okay, so deep inside that metabolic engine, you've got these two forces that are basically opposites, but they work together in perfect harmony. You can think of them as your body's own demolition crew and construction crew.
And this is where we meet those two crews. On one side, you've got catabolism. That's the demolition team. It takes big, complex stuff like the sugar from your lunch and breaks it down into simpler pieces. And in the process, it releases energy. On the other side, you've got anabolism. That's the construction crew. It takes simple little building blocks and uses energy to build them up into complex things your body needs, like new muscle. So one releases energy, the other one uses it up. Simple as that.
All right, now we're going to zoom way in and actually follow the energy. We're going to trace the path of one of those sugar molecules as it takes its very first step to becoming usable power for your body. This whole process is called glycolysis. So what exactly is glycolysis? The main thing to remember is that it happens in the cytoplasm. That's the main fluid-filled part of basically every single cell in your body. And its goal is pretty straightforward. Take a glucose molecule and split it, squeezing out a little bit of energy in a form the cell can actually use. That form is called ATP. You can think of ATP as the cell's universal currency. It's like a tiny, rechargeable battery that powers everything. Now, glycolysis happens in two main phases. And this first phase is kind of wild because to get started, the cell actually has to spend a little bit of energy. It invests two of those ATP batteries to tweak the glucose molecule, making it unstable and basically priming it to be broken apart. You know, you got to spend money to make money.
And this is where that investment pays off. In phase 2, that unstable molecule gets snapped in half, and through a few more chemical steps, those halves are turned into a new molecule called pyruvate. The important part is, along the way, the cell generates a total of 4 ATP molecules. So let's do the simple math here. The cell put in 2 ATP, and it got 4 ATP back out. That means for every single molecule of glucose that goes through this process, the cell walks away with a net profit of 2 ATP. Now, that's not a huge amount of energy, but it's super fast and it's a critical first step. But here's what's really cool about glycolysis. It's flexible. It can run whether oxygen is around or not. When there's plenty of oxygen, we call it aerobic glycolysis. And the final product is that pyruvate we talked about, which moves on to the next big stage. But when oxygen is low, like when you're sprinting, it switches to anaerobic. The end product becomes lactate. That's actually what gives you that burn in your muscles. It makes way less energy, but it makes it incredibly fast, which is exactly what you need in that moment. Now, that pyruvate that gets made when oxygen is available, well, that's its ticket to the main event. In this next section, we're heading to the real energy powerhouse of the cell, the tricarboxylic acid cycle, or the TCA cycle for short. The TCA cycle, which you might have also heard of as the Krebs cycle, all goes down inside the mitochondria, the legendary power plants of the cell. Its job is to take the fuel from glycolysis,
which gets converted into a molecule called acetyl-CoA, and just systematically rip it apart to harvest a massive amount of energy.
Look, you don't need to memorize all 8 chemical steps here. Let's just get the logic of it. First, the fuel, acetyl-CoA, enters the cycle. Then it gets oxidized. Its carbon atoms are stripped of their energy and released as the carbon dioxide you breathe out. All that harvested energy gets captured by special little shuttle molecules. And finally, the cycle resets itself so it's ready for the next round. It's a perfect self-sustaining loop.
And here it is, the big payoff. Remember that tiny profit of 2 ATP we got from glycolysis? Well, for each little bit of fuel that runs through the TCA cycle, the cell generates the equivalent of 12 ATP. That is an enormous leap in energy production. It's why the mitochondria are so absolutely critical for life as we know it.
So for our final section, let's zoom back out. We've seen all this incredible microscopic chemistry, but so what? Why does this matter for your actual day-to-day health?
Here's the bottom line. Metabolism is absolutely central to everything. The TCA cycle isn't just for carbs. It's the final pathway where fats and proteins also get converted into energy. In fact, this whole system generates about 2/3 of all the energy your body uses. And beyond just energy, it gives your body the building blocks it needs for other things. It helps detoxify your system, and yeah, it keeps you warm. It is, quite literally, what keeps you alive and running.
I absolutely love this quote from our source material because it just perfectly captures what's really going on. Metabolism isn't a simple loop. It's much more like a busy traffic circle. You've got compounds entering from all different roads, carbs, fats, proteins, and you've got other compounds exiting to go be used as building materials somewhere else. It's dynamic, it's responsive, it's incredibly smart.
So from a single bite of food to the energy that powers your every thought, it all comes back to metabolism. It's your body's engine. A dynamic traffic circle that never stops, constantly responding to the fuel you provide, which really leaves us with one last question, doesn't it? Your engine is always running. What will you choose to fuel it with next?